Okay, so we are talking about the circular why questioning. This is in our Distorted Thinking, Chapter 4. Let's continue. There are two parts to something called circular thinking or questioning. The question usually begins with why or how could. The questions are often rhetorical in nature, such as why did this happen to me or how could she do this to me. They are victimizing questions about fate or other people's intentions and are often based on assumptions. They are based on a belief that life isn't fair, which is true. The question is, at the time in history, why would one think that life is supposed to be fair? Sometimes these questions are a foil to looking closely at oneself and how one puts oneself in certain positions. It is a way to avoid responsibility for one's circumstance. Okay, I'm going to pause there. As adoptees, we don't have the responsibility of putting ourselves as an adoptee. We didn't have a say. And we're talking more towards foster care to adoption as well as private infant adoption. I'm not talking about adult adoption. That is a completely different situation, as well as stepchild adoption. I would put more towards foster care / private infant. It gets complex, but it's usually not the adult, right? Some kids have a say, but they don't understand the complexities behind it. We don't have a say, right? And when foster youth do have a say, it's usually, oh, the grass is greener on the other side, or there's really no explanation or true understanding. There's no better options. It's kind of like, this is what it is, right? With private infant adoption or pre-match birth, there is no say at all, right? We are the victims. And I'm going to reframe this into, how do we become from the victimizing questions to the surviving questions, right? How do we change that so that our thinking is more along that route? That doesn't negate that we weren't victimized, right? That doesn't negate that we still didn't have a voice. It's changing the frame, like, look, I am a survivor, right, of adoption. I will always be an adoptee. I was victimized by the industry. How can we do better? How can we be there for those that are currently going through this as, children, but also how can we change this for the future? And I think that is important to reframe our thinking in this. Whereas I feel like Nancy Newton-Verrier is kind of like, well, like, you got, I don't know, like, it just kind of feels like she worded it in such a harmful way that it's like, well, adoption, adoptees aren't victims. Or like, you guys did this to yourself. And that's not true. We didn't have a voice. Now, I will also say that bio parents were victimized by societal norms, by lack of financial and or emotional support. And there's a lot there. We're underage and forced to relinquish their child. And as for the adoptive parents, they can also be seen as a victim, not so much as bio parents and, especially adoptees. But yes, they are preyed on, right? Preyed. And I'm making that very clear with that prey, right? They are the prey to the adoption agencies, right? The adoption agencies in society are like, oh, you don't have a child. Well, here's this option. You can always do this, right? And they make them feel bad because a lot of them have fertility issues, which very much is seen as a disability, right? Does that mean that they should then go prey on bio parents and children? No, of course not, right? So I want to make that clear. There's a hierarchy here, but they are also preyed on, right? The top of the food chain here are these adoption agencies. So just putting that out there. But we can have a little bit of empathy. A little bit, at least. Anyway, continuing on. It can be a way of blaming others for something that is inconveniencing oneself, a form of disappointment. Why isn't Janet here yet? She promised to pick me up at 7. Then 5 minutes later, why is she doing this to me? One can allow oneself to become angry over the fact that Janet is late or to label her as inconsiderate. Before doing that, however, it is important to closely examine the situation and the person involved. One way is to do that is to answer the question you are asking. Don't just ask the questions over and over like a mantra. There are many reasons that Janet may be late other than trying to annoy or inconvenience you. Okay, so let me pause there. First of all, whether Janet was trying or not, is it an inconvenience or be annoying when people are late? Yes. Are some people just naturally late people? Also, yes. My mother is one of those, and it absolutely bugs the frick out of me, okay? And so I always try to leave like 20 minutes early, and she's always behind. Even with that. And it annoys me. And I'm sure I annoy her because I'm like, we gotta get going. Anyway, is it still inconsiderate because time is money, right? You can't get that time back? Yes. Could there be other factors to it? Possibly, right? So, one thing is, like with my issue, I'm very time anxiety, right? That is very much a reaction. It is very much a trauma response. In my, like from what I've read, and it puts me on edge. Like if I am 5 minutes early, I still feel like I'm late, right? But we're going to continue on, right? Is it crucial that Janet be on time? Is Janet usually inconsiderate? If so, it might be important to talk to her about how that irritates you. If Janet is habitually late, she may be exhibiting passive-aggressive behavior, and it would be important to call her out on it. But if she is usually punctual and considerate, then might be time to think about something else that might be going on. Maybe she had to get gas, or the phone rang as she was leaving, or the babysitter was late. It may not be about you. Okay, pausing there because we just talked about my mom for a moment. I told you guys, right? My mom runs late. And yes, sometimes, if not almost all the time, it is the phone rang late, or she forgot something, or she has to start cleaning something right before. It's ridiculous. She'll find some excuse, and it's a whole thing. So I find that if it's habitual, yes. Now, if it's something like, first of all, if you had to go get gas and you knew that and you didn't like put that into your timing, like that's on you as the driver, just saying. If the phone rang, maybe like, that, you can't always do that. If the babysitter's late, that's, on the babysitter, right? Or there's traffic. Sometimes, yes, things are out of our control. But this is why time is money. Try to be there early. And I know, like, don't get me wrong, I still get mad at my mom for doing these things because it's still habitual. Even if it's not technically always her fault. Like, she can't control when the phone rings, right? But ignore the phone. Let it go to the, answering machine. Call them back later or say, hey, can't talk, I'm running out the door now, right? There's ways to go about it. Okay, Continuing on. It might not be about you. It is important to return to some kind of perspective on the circumstance based on facts and not on a perceived sense of victimization. The other form of circular questioning is the kind of questions that 4-year-olds ask. Daddy, why is Grandpa old? When Daddy answers because he has lived a long time, the question comes up, but why has he lived in a long time? But why has he lived a long time? And so on. This kind of questioning in adult form can tremendously be annoying. Yes, absolutely. Because one gets the impression after a while that the questioner doesn't really want an answer to the question, but only wants to argue about something or to make the person attempting to answer the question wrong. The questions go round and round until someone gets angry, perhaps the answerer. Then the question is, why are you mad at me? I just want to know why you didn't answer your phone last night. Of course, we already know that the original answer did not satisfy her. And no matter what the answer would have been, it would not have satisfied her, because she was angry and wanted to make the perpetrator wrong. Okay, so I'm going to say this because I did used to teach. It's complex. I used to teach preschool. I still teach, but not preschool. Little kids it's not that they are trying to annoy you, it's that they are generally very, very curious little guys or girls and don't understand that it could get annoying, but they're just trying to understand at their level, right? So instead of saying to the answer, why is Grandpa so old? And you say, because he's lived a long time. And they said, but why has he lived a long time? You could be like, well, Grandpa was born, X amount of years ago. Like, he was born 70 years ago. That 70 is a big number, more than, 2, 3, 4, right? So you could put it into perspective in that way. Yes, some people, especially as adults, get more, like, the older you are, the more complex emotions you feel or are able to describe. But I'm going to say, like, just because you're older doesn't mean you have the maturity level and the understanding to step back. And so sometimes your emotion takes over. So even if there's a valid answer, like, why didn't you answer the phone last night? And your answer was like, I fell asleep, or I was in the shower and forgot to call you back. Something like really not a big deal, right? And they're angry about it. There's nothing you can do. That person needs to learn that, like, some things are out of control. It's okay. Like, as long as it wasn't an emergency, I don't see the issue. And even if it was an emergency, was the emergency handled, right? But usually it's not an emergency, right? Things happen. This is why I talk about emotional intelligence and being able to step out of your mindset. And, like, you could still feel, right? Like, I'm not negating that you still have your points, but you can step out and be able to see the other person's perspective. That doesn't negate how you feel or how you, or your opinion, but you're also just, like, able to step into someone else's shoes. And I will say that it's a very complicated thing to do. A lot of people are not able to do it. Okay, continuing on. I usually advise people to avoid asking a question beginning with the word why. For some reason, that word puts people on the defensive. Of course, in the above scenario, that is exactly what the questioner wants. But if only one really wants an answer to a why question, a better way of asking it would start out by saying, I'm curious about what happened last night. Why didn't you answer your phone? And I was a little worried about you. Or, I'm wondering what happened last night. I thought we had an agreement to talk on the phone. but you didn't answer. These kinds of open-ended inquiries take away the blame tone and present a sincere concern for the missed opportunity and the person involved. In other words, it isn't just about me. So, as Nancy Newton Verrier is saying in this aspect, could be a very a new way of framing things, right? Like we could say, like, oh, why is the sky blue, right? And you could have like that scientific answer, but sometimes we don't need that scientific answer, right? Like, why are you always running late? It sounds more blaming, right? Instead of, hey, I noticed that you always tend to run late. How can we fix this issue? And then go from there. Some people still are defensive about it and some people are not. So we'll see about that. Continuing on. Whenever someone over the age of 7 starts in with the whys, after the second or third question, it is time to stop answering. Perhaps asking, what is it you really want to know? Or, what is it you really want to say? Would be a good way to respond about them. The circular questioning gets nowhere and is only a game, usually ending in anger on one or both people's parts. So I'm going to say this again, as if it's a scientific reasoning on the questioning, like I said, children are very curious. And I feel like even at a young age, right, even 7 is quite young, if a child is asking why. So for example, my son was in the pool the other day and he goes, why is it that if you don't spread your body out like a starfish, right, for example, and you're just kind of like tucked in, right, that you tend to float to the bottom. But when you spread out, you tend to float more. And like I said, it's very scientific, right? I don't find that to be an issue personally, right? And it's about curious minds, right? So I think that when we talk about things, why questions are not always a bad thing, but could you put something in front of it like Nancy Newton Verrier was suggesting? Maybe, right? And your answer, just remember that it's also up to you as the person answering the question. Hey, buddy, I don't know that answer right now. We can always go look it up later, right? Or, hey, why don't we do the science experiment, right? Or, why don't we research that to find out, right? And it could be anything. In terms of like the personal to personal relationship, why are you always running late? Like, oh, I don't have very good time management skills, right? And then maybe, and I say maybe because it really depends on the person and the situation and reading it, is, hey, do you want suggestions on those time management skills and how to do better? Or, just, oh, okay, well, maybe I could suggest we talk 30 minutes prior to that and see how things go from there. So just some ways to go about it. Anyway, have a terrific day, and I'll see you guys next time.